Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are tuning in today, I want you to just take a breath.
Seriously, just take a beat.
Usually we are sprinting through modern tech trends or dissecting these really complex geopolitical shifts. We're usually running at 100 miles an hour.
And today is definitely not that.
No, today is different. We are slowing things down. We're going for a vibe that I can only describe as, well, it's relaxed. It's a little bit chilling in the best sense of the word, but it is also, and this really surprised me, it's surprisingly funny.
It is a very unique mixture. Today, we are dealing with what you might call high strangeness, psychic phenomena, astral projection, remote viewing. But it is all grounded in the most mundane, relatable domestic problems you can imagine.
Yeah, it's not happening in some ancient temple. It's happening in a living room.
Exactly.
And before we get into the weeds here, I want to set the scene for you listening right now. We aren't just reading a text today. I want you to imagine we are stepping into a time machine together.
Dialing the clock back.
Right. We are dialing it back to Monday, August 1st, 1966. We are in Elmira, New York. It is humid. There are no smartphones, no internet, no distractions. Just a husband and wife, Rob and Jane, in a slightly cramped apartment. There's a typewriter, maybe some cigarette smoke in the air, and a Ouija board.
And a very sick cat.
Yes, and a sick cat. That is actually incredibly important.
It is crucial context for this. To be specific, the material we are taking a deep dive into today is session 276 of the Early Sessions Book 6 of the Seth Material.
Right, and for those who might be new to this, the Seth Material is a collection of thousands of pages of dictated wisdom from an entity named Seth, which was channeled by Jane Roberts. But we aren't looking at the whole library today.
No, we are looking at this one specific Monday night, and the context, as you hinted at, is just chaos.
Absolute chaos.
It is the classic bad week. Jane Roberts, the medium, has been physically ill. She actually missed the previous scheduled session, which was a really rare occurrence for them.
Super right.
Right. And Rob, her husband, is stressed out of his mind. And they have this new kitten, Catherine, who has suddenly come down with distemper, which in 1966, that was a very serious, often fatal virus for a cat.
And on top of the flu and the dying cat, Jane is spiraling about her career. Right.
Right. She is under massive pressure regarding the publication of her book on ESP. She is terrified of the public reaction, terrified of being seen as a fraud. It's classic imposter syndrome.
It's the perfect storm, just that totally overwhelming scenario. But here is why we are looking at this specific session. Amidst all this stress, they sit down, Jane goes into a trance, Seth comes through, and instead of just saying, there, it'll be okay, he lays out this fascinating, almost mechanical roadmap of how our minds mess with our bodies.
It really turns into a masterclass on the biology of stress.
It totally does. We're going to find out why your cook's mood might literally be poisoning you. We are going to look at the biological mechanics of astral projection, and spoiler alert, it actually involves eating snacks.
Sugar, specifically.
Yes, sugar. And finally, we are going to look at a incredibly spooky remote viewing experiment involving a lumberyard bill.
It's quite the agenda for one night.
It is. But before we unpack all of that, we have some mandatory housekeeping to get out of the way. We need to state clearly that this deep dive will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
That is correct. And we must give credit where it is due. The Seth Material is published by the New Awareness Network.
And we really want to emphasize that.
Yes. If what we discuss today sparks your interest, and frankly, it really should be strongly encourage you to study the Seth Material books. You are getting our analysis here, but the source material is where the real magic is. You can visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
Definitely check that out. This is deep stuff, and we are only scratching the surface today. So let's jump into section 1. The psychosomatic feedback loop, or as I like to call it, Jane and the Cat.
Jane and the Cat is a perfect title for this.
So set the scene a bit more deeply for us. Jane missed the last session. Why is that so significant?
Well, Jane and Rob were incredibly disciplined. They held sessions twice a week like clockwork. Missing one meant something was seriously wrong. The session notes open with Rob explaining that the previous Wednesday's session was canceled because Jane had been ill for several days.
Right.
And Rob mentions that Jane used a pendulum, a tool she used for getting subconscious answers. And the pendulum told her the illness was brought on by nerves and panic over her forthcoming ESP book.
I want to pause on that phrase, nerves and panic, because I think every creative person listening can relate to that feeling. You finish a project, you're about to put it out into the world, and instead of being happy, you just get sick.
It is the body reacting to the exposure. She hadn't been sleeping well. She hadn't been working well. The anxiety was just vibrating through her system. And when Seth comes through in this session, he addresses this immediately.
And interestingly, he doesn't offer tea and sympathy.
Not at all. He offers a mechanical explanation.
He acts almost like an engineer looking at a broken machine.
Precisely. He explains why the machine broke. There is a quote here from the session that we really need to unpack. Seth says, quote, "The overall psychic and mental problems were concentrated into physical symptoms, always, incidentally, the last resort."
A last resort. That is a heavy phrase. It implies the body tried other ways first and just failed.
Exactly. This is a core concept in Seth's philosophy of health. He explains that there is always an initial attempt to handle problems on a mental or psychic level. If you can process the stress, if you can resolve the conflict in your mind, or even in your dream state, the body doesn't need to get involved.
So the body is sort of the goalkeeper.
That is a very good analogy. The mind is the defense. If the anxiety gets past the mind, the body has to catch it. Physical illness represents a failure to deal with those problems sufficiently on that mental level.
It's like a circuit breaker in a house.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah, if the surge of anxiety, the voltage is too high for the mind's wiring to handle, the breaker trips to save the house from burning down. The body shuts down, you get sick.
And in this case, the illness served a very specific, almost poetic function. Seth points out that Jane was sick to her stomach. Why? Because she couldn't stomach the pressure of the work.
The body is acting out a pun. That is just wild to me.
It is literal symbolism. It sounds funny, but biologically it is highly effective. Because she was physically sick to her stomach, what was she forced to do?
She had to stop working. She had to lie down.
Exactly. She couldn't worry about the book because she was too busy vomiting. The illness achieved the goal that her mind wanted, but couldn't ask for a break. Seth says the system was rid of the difficulty in this manner.
So in a weird, twisted way, the illness was a success.
A functional success, yes. Seth even calls the illness a regrettable, but on the whole beneficial act. Because if that circuit breaker hadn't tripped, if she hadn't been forced to stop via the flu, the psychic stress could have caused much more severe damage to her stability.
It's the lesser of two evils. The body saying, I'll give you the flu so you don't have a nervous breakdown.
Precisely. It is the body taking over because you won't listen.
But then this story gets a little sadder and a little more complex because we have to talk about Catherine, the cat. This isn't just about Jane. It is about the whole house.
Yes. This is where we get into the interconnectedness of living things in a household. This is where Seth pushes beyond standard psychology into something more ecological.
So Rob notes that their new kitten, Catherine, fell ill with distemper right after Jane got sick. Now, distemper is nasty stuff. It is a severe virus. But Seth's explanation of why the cat got sick right then is fascinating. He doesn't say it's just a coincidence.
No, there are no coincidences in Seth's world. Seth claims that the distemper virus had actually been in the cat system for some time. It was dormant. But under normal circumstances, the cat was protected by two things. First, its own native resiliency, its immune system. And second, and this is the key, the psychic reinforcement of its owners, Jane and Rob.
Okay, let's stop the tape there for a second. Psychic reinforcement. This suggests that as pet owners, we are doing something active, energetically, to keep our pets alive.
That is the direct implication.
Right.
We create a protective environment.
Right.
We know we do this physically. We give them shelter, food, warmth. But Seth is saying we also do it psychically. We project an energy of safety and vitality that actually boosts the animal's immune system.
Wow.
Seth says you used your psychic energies to aid Rupert, that is Seth's name for Jane, and the animal was left to his own resiliency, and it was not enough.
So break that down. Jane gets sick. Rob gets panicked.
Right. Rob focuses 100% of his energy on Jane. Jane focuses inward on her own misery.
So they basically pulled the energetic safety net out from under the cat.
In a manner of speaking, yes. The energy in the house shifted entirely inward to Jane. The cat was left cold, psychically speaking.
Yeah.
And without that extra layer of protection, the dormant virus woke up and took over.
That puts a terrifying amount of responsibility on pet owners. It is not just, did you feed the cat? It is your vibe healthy enough to keep the cat healthy?
It is a profound thought. It suggests our domestic ecosystems are deeply entangled. Your stress is your cat's stress. Your resilience is your dog's resilience. But the good news is, Seth reassures them.
Right, he doesn't leave them guilt-ridden.
No, he says you need have no worries now concerning the animal's survival. Why? Because Jane was recovering. Her energy was returning. She could start reinforcing the cat again.
And he mentions the antibiotics, too. He's not anti-medicine.
No, not at all. This is important for you listening to understand. Seth isn't saying don't go to the vet. He says the antibiotics serve as a physical reinforcement. Since the illness is now physical, you treat it physically. But the psychic support is the foundation that allows the medicine to work.
I love that balance. It is not magic or medicine. It is both. You need the pill, but you also need the love.
It is a truly holistic view of the household organism.
Okay, so Jane is recovering, the cat is on the mend, the crisis is passing. And how do they celebrate? They throw a party.
A very effective party, apparently.
Which leads us to section 2, the sacred science of food and explosive laughter. Rob notes in the transcript that they had a party on Saturday night that lasted until 4:45 a.m.
Which, let's be honest, is a solid party for a couple dealing with a sick cat and impending deadlines.
That is a very solid party for 1966. And they invited their friends Bill and Tom. And Seth has some analysis on this hangover-inducing event. He implies this wasn't just for fun, it was actually medicinal.
He does. He points out the logic of the guest list. He says you chose, both of you, the two people who are the most psychically gifted of your acquaintance.
So they didn't just invite the drinking buddies, they invited the high-frequency friends.
Subconsciously, yes. They needed the reinforcement. They needed to bring new, vibrant energy into that sick house to clear out the stagnant air of illness. And Seth focuses on one specific element of the party: explosive laughter.
Explosive laughter. I love that phrasing. Not just a chuckle, the kind that hurts your ribs.
He says you understand the therapeutic results of explosive laughter. He notes that the laughter was in direct proportion to the inner tensions.
So the more stressed you are, the harder you laugh.
And the more you need to laugh.
Yeah.
It acts as a release valve. Remember the circuit breaker analogy. The illness was one way to trip the breaker. Laughter is another, much more pleasant way. It discharges that built-up psychic pressure, the excess voltage, so it doesn't have to manifest as sickness.
I think we have all felt that. You know, when you have been stressed for weeks, holding it all together, and then you get together with your best friends and someone says something totally stupid and you laugh until you are crying, and suddenly the world feels manageable again.
It resets the system. It is a biological and psychic reset. Seth is validating that intuition. It's not just a distraction, it is therapy.
But then the conversation pivots to food, and this part, honestly, this part scared me a little bit.
It is one of the more provocative concepts in this session.
Seth starts talking about Bill, their friend who came to the party, and how Bill is always trying to repay them for meals. And Seth drops this quote. He says, "Food is indeed sacred."
And he continues by saying, its preparation is more a psychic matter than a physical one.
Okay, hold on. More a psychic matter than a physical one. That goes against everything we know about nutrition.
It certainly challenges the materialist view. He is suggesting that the nutritional content or the ingredients, the vitamins, the proteins, are secondary to the energy infused into the food by the cook. He says the preparer of food puts more into it than spices.
And then comes the scary part.
Yes. Seth warns that a food can be contaminated, poisoned by a cook, with no physical elements involved at all.
Poisoned. He actually uses the word poison.
He does. He gives a very specific, visceral example. He says when 10 people are poisoned, for example, by a food, it is no coincidence, and more is involved than mayonnaise left in the sun.
That is such a specific image. Mayonnaise in the sun. We've all been at that summer picnic.
Right. But he is saying, look, the bacteria is one thing. But why do some people get sick and others don't? Or why does the bacteria grow so fast? He suggests that if the cook has an unhealthy psychic nature or just a really bad temper that day, they are putting that toxicity into the meal.
Energetically, they are spiking the punch with rage.
Exactly. And if the people eating it are susceptible, they can get physically ill. He even suggests that in many households, steady small illnesses often result because the preparer of foods has an unhealthy psychic nature.
That is horrifying. It's like, eat your vegetables, kids, even though I am seething with resentment while I boil them.
It really makes you rethink the phrase made with love. We usually think of that as just a nice sentiment. Seth is arguing it is a biological ingredient.
It explains so much about Grandma's cooking, doesn't it? Like, why does a sandwich taste better when someone who adores you makes it?
Seth would say it is literally more nutritious, psychically speaking. He mentions that Jane's healing nature, as Seth puts it, protects and enriches their meals. Even when she cooks simply, the food is good for them because she is good for them.
So the takeaway here for you listening is, if you are angry, step away from the stove. Just order a pizza.
Or at least clear your mind. Do a little meditation before you start chopping the onions.
Right. Do some breathing exercises. Do not poison the lasagna with your bad day.
Precisely. Food is a conductor of energy. Treat it that way.
Okay, moving on to section 3. The biology of astral projection. This is where we get into the really deep woo.
This is where the session takes a hard left turn into metaphysics.
Seth decides to give a biology lesson, but not normal biology. He breaks down the biology of leaving your body.
And this is fascinating because usually when people talk about out-of-body experiences, they talk about chakras or vibrations or silver cords of light. It's all very mystical. Seth talks about hormones, blood pressure, and sugar molecules.
He treats it like a mechanic describing an engine. If you want to drive the car, check the oil.
He begins by stating a fundamental premise. Projections actually involve a change of atomic structure. Consciousness simply changes its form.
That is a big claim, atomic structure.
It implies that consciousness isn't just a ghost in the machine. It has a physics to it. He says the physical body is maintained, but chemical changes occur to allow the consciousness to separate.
So what are the symptoms? If I'm about to launch out of my body, what does it feel like physically?
Well, initially, during the separation phase, when you were trying to leave, there is a strong charge of adrenaline.
Which explains why people often feel a racing heart or panic right before they have an out-of-body experience. I've heard people describe the vibrational state where their heart feels like it's exploding.
Exactly. That is the launch sequence. Seth mentions high activity of the thyroid gland and a charge of sexual hormones, which he says are utilized also for projection.
Wait, sexual hormones? That seems unrelated.
Not in this framework. He views sexual energy as raw, creative energy. It's a potent fuel source. The body mobilizes everything. It has adrenaline, thyroid, testosterone, or estrogen to give consciousness the push it needs to shift gears.
Okay, so that is the launch. The engine revs up. But once the projection is accomplished, once you are out, what happens to the body left behind in the bed?
It crashes.
Crashes how?
He describes a marked decline of chemical activity, a drop in temperature, sometimes very low, and a drop in blood pressure. And interestingly, he notes that rapid eye movements, REM, which we associate with dreaming, cease entirely.
So if a scientist were monitoring you in a sleep lab, they wouldn't see you dreaming. They would see you in a coma.
Seth says the physical body is in a deep trance state. The muscles are not used. The normal activity vanishes. It is a state of suspended animation almost.
Okay, so the body is cold, the blood pressure is down, the eyes are still. But here's the part that made me laugh out loud. Seth gives advice on how to make this happen safely, and his advice is snacks.
It is the sugar connection.
Yeah. He basically says, if you want to travel the astral plane, eat a donut.
Well, he recommends a small amount of starchy or sugar food, but the reasoning is very scientific in his framework. He says the body uses a specific sugar molecule to maintain the tether between the physical body and the traveling consciousness.
So the sugar is like the string on the kite.
In a way, he says it aids in connecting the consciousness to the body, and without it, under some conditions, consciousness could be cut off from return.
Cut off from return. That is terrifying. That is literally the plot of a horror movie.
It is a strong warning. He says there's a connection that must be partially physical, and it is based on this sugar molecule. If you run out of fuel, if your blood sugar drops too low, you might get stuck. Or more likely, you will have a very hard time getting back and remembering the experience. The data won't download properly because the cable is frayed.
I love the practical instruction here. Here is the exact quote. Before conscious projection, I would therefore recommend you take a small amount of starchy or sugar food.
It thins out the molecular structure, he claims. It makes the separation smoother.
And he also gives tips on when to do it, because apparently nighttime isn't the best time.
No, and this is highly counterintuitive. We usually associate dreams with night. But Seth suggests that nap projections during the day are excellent.
Naps are safer.
He says the body is well stocked during the day. You've eaten breakfast, you've eaten lunch. It hasn't depleted its energy reserves like it has at 3 in the morning after fasting all night. So nap projections are exceedingly safe, and you can stay out longer because you have more fuel in the tank.
Finally, a spiritual teacher who advocates for naps and snacks. This is my kind of guru. To reach enlightenment, lie down after lunch and have a cookie.
It sounds funny, but it aligns perfectly with his biological explanation. He also mentions that for women, the period just before the menstrual cycle is a good time for this, likely due to the hormone fluctuations we mentioned earlier.
And regarding alcohol, he says it's of some benefit, though not to any great degree.
So a little wine might loosen you up, lower the inhibitions, but don't overdo it. You don't want to be drunk on the astral plane.
So to recap the Seth method for leaving your body.
Yeah.
Eat a cookie, take a nap in the morning, and maybe have a tiny drink.
It sounds deceptively simple, but he insists the biological mechanism is very real. It grounds the mystical experience in physical reality.
It is just so grounded. I love it. Okay, let's move to the final section. Section 4, the envelope experiment.
This is where we switch from biology to detective work.
Right. So explain the setup here. This was a recurring test Jane and Rob did, correct?
Yes, they did this often to test Seth's ability to see into the physical world. Rob would put an object in a sealed envelope, double sealed, actually, between pieces of cardboard so you couldn't feel the shape. And Jane, channeling Seth, would try to describe it.
And in this session, the object was a bill, a receipt.
A very mundane receipt. It was a bill for masonite, which is a type of compressed wood board that Rob bought from a lumber yard in a town called Wellsburg, New York.
So Jane has never seen this bill. It is completely sealed up. Rob knows what it is, but Jane doesn't. And Seth starts rattling off impressions.
And the accuracy here is chilling. It's not vague at all. It is highly specific.
Let's look at the hits. What is the first thing he gets?
One of the first things Seth says is the word stern. He says, I do not know if this refers to stern as severe or stern as a ship.
Stern. Okay.
Yeah.
And Rob makes a fascinating connection here.
Yes. The lumberyard owner's first name was Glenn, and Rob and Jane had recently visited Enfield's Glen State Park. But the connection goes deeper. Stern relates to a ship, which relates to water. Dad Glenn had a stream and a pool. But also, stern sounds like the back of a boat. It feels like a word association game played at high speed.
It feels like he's grasping for a hook. Stern, Glen, water.
It is symbolic association. But then it gets more literal. Seth says, quote, 4 squares, or 4 and 4 squares.
And what did Rob buy?
He bought 2 4x8 sheets of masonite. But, and this is the key, he had the lumberyard worker cut them in half so they would fit in his car. So he ended up with exactly 4 square pieces of wood.
4 squares. That is direct. That is not a metaphor.
Then Seth gets an impression of the feeling of something hanging over, threatening or overhanging, and dark.
No, this sounds ominous, like a storm cloud.
Jane said she physically felt a heavy weight hanging over her head. But when they looked at the bill later, the very first word at the top, in large print, was roofing.
Roofing. A roof hangs over your head.
Exactly. Seth interpreted the word roofing not as letters. He didn't read R-O-F-I-N-G. He perceived the concept of the word. He felt the sensation of what a roof does. It hangs over. It blocks the sky.
That is incredible. It's like he is translating the text back into the feeling that created the word, and then he sees something under it.
Something small and bright also, beneath this overhanging portion.
And on the bill.
Directly beneath the word roofing was the item. 1 roller pan, a shiny tin-coated metal pan. Small, bright, and literally underneath the roofing on the paper layout.
So he is reading the layout of the page, but translating it into feelings and images.
That is exactly how remote viewing often works. It is not like reading a PDF. It is like decoding symbols and sensory data.
But the craziest hit, the one that really stuck with me, is the bad eye story. This is where it goes from reading a paper to reading a mind.
This is definitely the highlight of the experiment. Seth gives this quote. He says, an oval shape, or eye shape, that is, this kind of an eye, inside of a rectangle or triangle. And while saying this, Jane points to her own eye.
Why an eye? Is there an eye drawn on the bill?
No, there's nothing about an eye on the paper. But the worker who wrote out the bill, the man who held the pen and touched the paper, had a bad eye. His face was asymmetrical.
Okay, so he is picking up on the physical appearance of the clerk.
But there is more. This worker had told Rob a story while he was cutting the wood.
The story about the portrait.
Yes. The worker had been in the war. He told Rob that an artist had drawn a portrait of him overseas. And the artist had fixed his face. In the drawing, made it symmetrical, fixed the bad eye.
So the worker has a deep emotional memory about his eye and a drawing of his eye. And he touches the bill.
And Seth picks up on all of it. He mentions a tournament, perhaps symbolic, a crossing, as of swords. Seth later clarifies that the swords were bayonets. It was a war connection.
So Seth didn't just read the paper, he read the person who touched the paper.
This is psychometry. The idea that objects hold the energy, the memories of the people who handle them. Seth picked up on the war, the death connection, the bad eye, all from the residual energy left by that lumberyard worker on the receipt.
That makes you look at antique stores entirely differently.
It certainly does. You're not just buying a chair. You're buying the memories of everyone who sat in it. You're buying the arguments held over the table, the laughter, the grief.
And Seth actually comments on this method of sensing. He explains how he is doing it.
He does. He refers to Jane feeling the roofing word as a heavyweight. He says this is a sense we all use subconsciously, something like the way you register temperature.
We just don't pay attention to it.
We filter it out. We walk into a room and say, the vibe is bad in here, or I don't like that guy. But Seth says that isn't just a hunch. It is a precise sensory mechanism. We are constantly scanning the psychic temperature of our environment, reading the history of objects, reading the health of our pets. We just ignore the data.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if we zoom out, what does all this mean? We have gone from cat distemper to magic cookies to psychic lumber yards. It feels random, but it isn't.
No, it is not random at all. The common thread is that the physical world and the mental world are not separate. They are bleeding into each other constantly.
Let's recap the key takeaways here for you listening. Number one, illness isn't just bad luck.
No. It can be a safety valve, a circuit breaker for psychic stress. It forces us to do what we refuse to do, consciously rest. So if you get sick, ask yourself, what was I avoiding? What did I need a break from?
Number two, your pets are psychic sponges.
They are part of your energetic ecosystem. Your resilience supports them. When you crash, they are vulnerable. So taking care of yourself is taking care of them. It is not selfish to prioritize your mental health. It is necessary for the whole household.
Number three, the angry cook.
Food is sacred. The energy of the cook matters. If you are preparing food, try to do it with love, or at least neutrality. Do not cook your anger into the stew. And maybe be careful where you eat out.
Number four, the biology of astral projection.
It is a chemical process involving hormones and temperature shifts. And crucially, the body needs fuel sugar to maintain the tether to the traveling consciousness.
So eat the snack, take the nap, don't starve yourself for spirituality. And finally, number five, objects have memories.
Psychometry. A piece of paper can carry the story of a war veteran's eye. We leave our imprint on everything we touch.
It is a massive amount to take in, but it paints a picture of a world that is so much richer, so much more interconnected than we usually perceive. It makes the world feel truly alive.
It encourages us to be more mindful. Mindful of our stress, our moods, our cooking, and even the objects we handle every single day.
Here is where it gets really interesting. I want to leave you with a provocative thought. Seth said, consciousness simply changes its form. He describes us leaving our bodies chemically every single night.
It raises the ultimate question.
Are we ever truly in our bodies? Or are we just visitors? Are we just consciousness renting a biological suit for the day and then floating on a sugar tether at night?
It suggests the body is more of an anchor than a container. It holds us here, but it isn't us.
An anchor. I really like that. Listen, we've covered a massive amount of ground, but this is just one session. Session 276, there are hundreds more.
If this piqued your interest, please go to the source, read the books. This deep dive was based on the early sessions, Book 6. You can find it at setcenter.com/the early sessions.
And again, a huge thank you to the New Awareness Network for publishing this incredible material. This deep dive is for educational purposes, and we just want you to explore this stuff for yourself.
There's always more to learn.
Thanks for listening. Go hug your cat, eat a cookie, and try to have a nice nap. See you in the dream state.